I never thought I'd end up here, sharing my story with strangers on the internet. But right now, I don't know what else to do. My name's Adam, and for most of the last 6 years, I thought my marriage to Lisa was rock solid. We weren't the kind of couple who made headlines or got gushed over on social media, but we had what I thought was a good life. We lived in a small, picturesque town in Colorado. I ran a successful landscaping business, and Lisa worked part-time at a nonprofit, mostly helping with community outreach programs. It wasn't glamorous, but we liked it simple. Or at least I thought we did. Things were good for the most part. We had a nice routine: Friday night movies, Saturday hikes, and Sunday mornings sipping coffee on the porch. Lisa was always the heart of our little world. Her smile could brighten any room, and her passion for helping others made her glow in a way I couldn't help but admire. But about 3 months ago, I started noticing little changes. At first, it was just a shift in her demeanor. Lisa, who used to talk my ear off about her projects and ideas, became quieter, more reserved. When I asked, she'd wave it off and blame stress at work. "We're just taking on more cases," she'd say. "It's nothing to worry about." Then there were the late nights. She started staying out later, claiming she was meeting with donors or attending community events. I didn't think much of it at first. Lisa had always been devoted to her work, and it wasn't unusual for her to go the extra mile. But when those late nights became more frequent, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The first rail crack appeared when I came home early one afternoon and found Lisa on a phone call. Her voice, usually so warm and steady, was sharp, almost panicked. "I told you to wait," she hissed. "He can't know." "Not yet." When she saw me standing there, her face went pale. She quickly ended the call, brushing off my questions with a forced laugh. "It's just work," she said. "You know how chaotic things can get." But something in her tone told me this wasn't about work. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the doubt was planted, and I couldn't ignore it. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together what could possibly be going on. At the time, I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed or keeping a secret for a good reason. Looking back, I was a fool to give her the benefit of the doubt. After that phone call, things between Lisa and me felt off. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down, I knew better. I started paying more attention, watching for clues, looking for anything that might explain the sudden distance between us. It didn't take long before I noticed something else. Lisa had started dressing differently. Don't get me wrong, she's always been stylish in a casual way. But this was different. She started wearing more makeup, getting her hair done more often, and her outfits felt flashier. I tried to compliment her at first, thinking maybe she just wanted to feel good about herself, but her reactions were cold, distant. "Thanks," she'd say flatly, before changing the subject. And then there was her phone. Lisa used to leave it lying around on the counter on the couch, but now it was glued to her hand. She had added a passcode, something she'd never done before, and every time a notification popped up, she'd angle the screen away from me. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. "Relax, Adam," she said. "It's just work stuff. You wouldn't understand." But the thing is, Lisa had always been an open book. This new secretive side of her felt completely alien. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. She'd been out late again, this time claiming she was meeting donors for dinner. When she got home, I decided to press her. "You're working late a lot these days?" I said casually as she walked through the door. Lisa barely looked at me as she kicked off her heels. "Yeah, it's a busy time of year. Lots of events." I nodded, trying to keep my tone light. "Must be nice to have such dedicated donors. You've been spending a lot of time with them." She froze for just a second, a blink and you'd miss it moment, before heading into the kitchen. "It's part of the job, Adam. You know that." "Who was it tonight?" I asked, following her. Lisa grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water, not meeting my eyes. "Just some new donors. Nothing exciting." Her answer felt rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. I decided to push a little further. "Funny," I said, leaning against the counter. I thought I saw your coworker Maggie at the store earlier. She didn't mention anything about a dinner. Lisa's hand tightened around the glass, but she recovered quickly. That's because Maggie wasn't invited, she said coolly. Not every meeting involves the whole team. She downed the water in one gulp and brushed past me. I'm exhausted, she said over her shoulder. Let's talk tomorrow. I stood there in the kitchen, staring after her, my stomach churning. Her story didn't add up, and I knew it. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, listening to her even breathing, a part of me wanted to confront her, to demand the truth. But another part of me, the part that still loved her, still wanted to believe in us, held back. I told myself I needed more. More proof, more time, more something. But I was starting to realize that whatever was going on, it was bigger than I wanted to admit. The following weeks were a blur of unease and doubt. Lisa's late nights became more frequent. Her phone never left her side, and our conversations grew shorter and more strained. I was desperate to trust her, but every instinct I had screamed that something was wrong. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I found something. Lisa had gone out to run errands, leaving me alone in the house. As I wandered into the laundry room to throw in a load, I noticed her purse sitting on the dryer. I don't know what possessed me to look, but before I realized what I was doing, I had opened it. At first, it was just the usual stuff: wallet, keys, some receipts. But then, tucked away in an inside pocket, I found a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a receipt from a fancy steakhouse downtown. One I knew Lisa loved, but that we hadn't been to in over a year. The date on the receipt was just 3 nights ago, one of the evenings she'd claimed to be working late. And there were 2 entrees listed. My stomach twisted. I stuffed the receipt back into her purse and slammed the dryer shut, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she'd gone with a coworker or even a friend. But deep down, I knew better. When Lisa came home later, I tried to act normal. How were the errands? I asked, forcing a smile as she walked through the door. Fine, she said, not looking at me. Just picked up a few things for work. Her tone was clipped, like she couldn't be bothered to elaborate. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I nodded and let it go. That night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I couldn't focus. I kept glancing at her, searching her face for any sign of guilt or remorse. But she was as calm as ever, laughing at the jokes on screen and sipping her glass of wine like nothing was wrong. And that's when it hit me. She was good at this. Whatever she was hiding, she'd been hiding it for a while. The next day, I decided to take things a step further. After she left for work, I started digging. I went through her social media, checked her emails, even scrolled through our phone bill online to see if there were any unfamiliar numbers. First, there was nothing. But then I saw it. A series of texts and calls to the same number, repeated almost daily. The number wasn't saved under a name, but the pattern was clear. Whoever this person was, they were important enough to warrant hours of conversation. I wrote the number down, my hands shaking. Part of me didn't want to know, but the rest of me, the part that felt betrayed and furious, needed answers. That night, as Lisa sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, I confronted her. Who's 719-555-8362? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She froze, her eyes snapping up to meet mine. What? The number, I said, holding up the paper. You've been calling and texting them constantly. Who is it? For a moment, she looked genuinely panicked. But then she recovered, her expression hardening. It's work-related, she snapped. Why are you even looking at my phone records, Adam? That's an invasion of privacy. Don't turn this around on me. I shot back. Who is it? I told you it's work, she said, standing up and shoving her chair back. God, you're so paranoid lately. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? The words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of her deflection. You're lying, I said finally, my voice low. I can see it all over your face. Lisa grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. I don't have to put up with this, she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'm going for a walk." And with that, she was gone. I stood in the empty kitchen, the paper still clenched in my hand, feeling the weight of her betrayal settle over me like a storm cloud. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. After Lisa stormed out that night, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the number I'd written down. My mind raced with questions, each more damning than the last. Who was this person? How long had she been hiding this from me? And most terrifyingly, how far had things gone? I knew I needed answers, and I couldn't rely on Lisa to give them to me. The next morning, I decided to call the number. My hands shook as I punched it in, half hoping no one would answer. But after a few rings, a smooth male voice came on the line. "Hello." I froze, caught off guard. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I scrambled to come up with something.
Istamarat.
"This is Adam. I think my wife Lisa has been in touch with you." There was a pause, long enough to make my heart race. Then the man said, "I'm sorry, I don't know a Lisa." His voice was calm, almost too calm, like he was rehearsed at dodging questions. "Are you sure?" I pressed. "She's been calling and texting this number a lot." Another pause. Then, in a clipped tone, he said, "I think you have the wrong number," and hung up. I stared at the phone, anger bubbling in my chest. That voice, it was familiar somehow, though I couldn't place it. Whoever he was lying. I spent the rest of the day distracted, barely able to focus on my work. By the time I got home, Lisa was already there, acting as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a quick smile and asked about my day, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Instead, I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed her laptop, and opened it. Lisa was always careful with her phone, but her laptop was a different story. I guess she thought I'd never bother to look. It didn't take long to find something. There, in her email drafts folder, was a message addressed to someone named EV. It was short and cryptic. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Let me know when we can meet again." My stomach turned as I stared at the screen. This wasn't work-related. This wasn't innocent. When I confronted Lisa that night, she didn't even bother denying it. "It's not what you think," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "Then what is it?" I demanded, holding up her laptop. "Because this sure as hell looks like what I think it is." Lisa sighed, like she was annoyed rather than caught. "He's just a friend," she said. "We've been working together on a project, and sometimes things get misinterpreted." "Misinterpreted," I repeated, my voice rising. "You called last night incredible, Lisa. What am I supposed to misinterpret about that?" She rolled her eyes. "Adam, you're overreacting. Nothing happened, okay? Just drop it." But I couldn't drop it. Not anymore. That night, while she slept, I copied the email onto a flash drive and took screenshots of the texts on her phone. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I'd need proof if this went any further. Something about the name EV stuck with me, though. Felt familiar, like I should have known who it was. It wasn't until later that week, when a neighbor casually mentioned seeing Lisa at a downtown bar, that everything started to fall into place. "She was with that Enrique guy," the neighbor said, lowering her voice like she was sharing a scandalous secret. "You know, the one everyone's been talking about." Enrique. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Enrique Valdez, also known as EV. The flashy new guy in town with deep pockets and an even deeper reputation. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was entangled with one of the most dangerous men in the state. Hearing the name Enrique Valdez sent a chill through me. Everyone in town had heard of him. He was the kind of man who oozed wealth and power, the kind of man who didn't just take what he wanted. He owned it. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were falling into place. Lisa's late nights, her sudden secrecy, the cryptic emails and texts. She wasn't just cheating. She was involved with him. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to figure out my next move. Confronting Lisa again felt pointless. She'd just lie, like she always did. And if Enrique was as dangerous as people said, I needed to tread carefully. One evening, while Lisa was out working late again, I decided to dig deeper. I'd already combed through her phone and laptop, but this time, I searched our house. At first, I didn't find much. Just the usual clutter, old receipts, unopened mail, random junk drawers. But then, tucked away in the back of her closet, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a small, black notebook. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, details about meetings, names I didn't recognize, and cryptic phrases like drop point confirmed and shipment arrival, 10 p.m. It didn't take a genius to figure out this wasn't about her nonprofit job. At the bottom of one page, scrawled in Lisa's neat handwriting, was a name I'd heard whispered around town. Enrique Valdez. My hands trembled as I flipped through the notebook. It was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just an affair. Lisa was involved in something bigger, something illegal. When she came home that night, I was waiting for her. The notebook sat on the coffee table between us. A silent accusation. "What the hell is this, Lisa?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. She froze, her eyes darting to the notebook. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Fear. Maybe? But then she quickly masked it with indifference. "It's nothing," she said, reaching for it. "Just some work notes." I snatched it away before she could touch it. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice rising. "This has nothing to do with your job. What's going on? Lisa? Who are these people? And what the hell does Enrique Valdez have to do with you?" Her face hardened. "You don't understand, Adam. It's complicated." "Then explain it to me," I snapped. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're working for a goddamn criminal." Lisa didn't respond. Instead, she stood up and grabbed her coat. "I can't do this right now," she said, her voice cold. "I'll be back later." And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone with the notebook and 1,000 unanswered questions. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what I'd found. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was in deep with someone dangerous. And if I wasn't careful, I could get dragged down with her. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I needed help. I wasn't sure who to trust, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let Lisa's lies destroy me. By the next morning, my decision was made. I needed to talk to someone. But who? Most of our friends were Lisa's, and I couldn't risk anyone tipping her off. I needed someone neutral, someone who could look at the situation objectively. That's when I remembered my old college buddy, Mike. He wasn't just a friend, he was also a detective. We hadn't talked much in recent years, but if anyone could help me figure this out, it was him. I called him that afternoon, my voice shaky as I explained the situation. "Mike, I think Lisa's involved in something bad," I said. "How bad are we talking?" he asked, his tone immediately serious. "Drugs," I said. "Or maybe smuggling. I don't know. But it's connected to Enrique Valdez." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Adam," he said finally, "if Valdez is involved, you're not just dealing with bad, you're dealing with dangerous. Are you sure about this?" I hesitated, glancing at the black notebook on the table in front of me. "I found notes," I said. "Meetings, shipments, his name. I don't know what else it could be." Mike sighed. "All right, listen. Don't do anything stupid. Bring me what you've got and I'll look into it. But, Adam, if she's really mixed up with Valdez, you need to be careful. These people don't mess around." His words sent a chill down my spine, but I nodded. "I'll be there in an hour." When I arrived at Mike's office, he greeted me with a firm handshake and a concerned look. I handed him the notebook, watching as his brow furrowed while he flipped through it. "This is detailed," he said, his voice low. "If this is real, it's enough to raise some serious red flags." "Can you find out more?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Mike nodded. "I'll see what I can do. But Adam, you need to think about your safety. If Lisa is involved with Valdez, there's no telling how far this goes. You need to decide what you're going to do if this blows up." "I just want the truth," I said. "Whatever it takes." Mike promised to call me as soon as he had any information. But as I left his office, a heavy sense of dread settled over me. I'd taken the first step, but it felt like I was walking into a storm I wasn't ready for. When I got home, Lisa was waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed and her expression icy. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "Out," I said shortly, not in the mood for her games. She stood, her eyes narrowing. "We need to talk." I braced myself. "About what?" Lisa hesitated, then said, "You need to stop digging, Adam. Whatever you think you've found, it's not what it looks like." Her words sent a wave of anger through me. "You're seriously going to stand there and tell me this is all in my head? After everything I've seen?" Lisa's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the kind of people you're messing with." "Then explain it to me," I shouted. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then she shook her head. "I can't," she said quietly. "Just drop it, Adam. For your own good." She turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, furious and terrified. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than I'd thought. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. Lisa's warning echoed in my head long after she left. "You don't understand the kind of people you're messing with." It wasn't just fear I felt, it was anger. She had chosen to protect herself and her secrets over our marriage, over me. If she thought I was going to back down, she didn't know me as well as she thought. The next day, Mike called with an update. "Adam, you were right to be worried," he said. "Valdez is bad news. His name's been popping up in connection with drug shipments and money laundering, but nothing we can pin on him. The guy's slippery." "And Lisa?" I asked, my voice tight. Mike sighed. "I ran the names from her notebook. A couple of them are known associates of Valdez. If she's involved with these people, she's in deep." His words sent a fresh wave of dread through me. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was criminal. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked. "Not much," Mike said. "But if you want to protect yourself, you need evidence. The notebook is good, but we need more. If you can get proof of her direct involvement, emails, texts, recordings, it'll help if this goes to court or worse, if Valdez targets you." The idea of confronting Lisa again felt like stepping into a minefield, but I knew Mike was right. I needed evidence. That night, I waited until Lisa was asleep and went back to her laptop. This time, I wasn't just looking for notes. I wanted everything. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. In her email, I discovered a string of messages between her and someone named E. The tone of the emails was flirtatious but also filled with details about meetings, payments, and plans. "The shipment is confirmed for Friday night," one email read. "We'll meet at the usual spot. Don't bring anyone you don't trust." There it was. Proof that Lisa wasn't just involved. She was actively participating. I copied everything onto a flash drive and took screenshots on my phone. By the time I was done, my hands were shaking. The next morning, Lisa acted like everything was normal. She smiled at me over breakfast, chatted about her plans for the day, and kissed my cheek before heading out. It was almost enough to make me question everything. Almost. As soon as she left, I called Mike and told him what I'd found. "This is big," he said, "but it's also dangerous. If Valdez finds out you're digging into his operations, he won't hesitate to shut you down." The weight of his words settled heavily on me. I'd already crossed a line, and there was no going back. "I don't care," I said. "She's my wife, Mike. I need to know the truth." That evening, I followed Lisa. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but desperation makes you do things you'd never imagine. She left the house around 8 p.m., dressed in heels and a sleek black dress that didn't scream work meeting. I stayed far enough behind her car to avoid suspicion, my heart pounding as I trailed her downtown. She pulled into the parking lot of an upscale hotel. I parked a block away and watched as she walked inside. For a moment, I debated leaving, but then I thought about everything I'd found. The lies, the emails, the notebook, and I knew I had to see this through. Inside, the lobby was buzzing with activity. Lisa was easy to spot in her dress, heading straight for the elevator. I waited until the doors closed before approaching the front desk. "Excuse me," I said, doing my best to sound casual. "I'm supposed to meet my wife, but I forgot which room she's in." "Lisa Carter," The woman behind the desk frowned. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out that information." Of course, I should have expected that. But before I could leave, a name on the reservation screen caught my eye. Valdez. Enrique. My stomach dropped. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was meeting him. Standing in that hotel lobby, seeing Valdez, Enrique on the reservation screen, I felt the last thread of hope snap. Lisa wasn't just tangled up in something dangerous. She was choosing it. I stepped outside, my thoughts racing. Confronting her right then and there felt reckless, but I couldn't just walk away. I needed proof, something undeniable. I waited in my car for over an hour, watching the lobby doors. Eventually, Lisa came out, arm in arm with Enrique Valdez. He was exactly as people described. Charismatic, confident, and oozing power. The way Lisa looked at him, it made my stomach churn. They got into a sleek black SUV, laughing as they drove off. I followed at a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they ached. The SUV led me to an industrial area on the outskirts of town, pulling into a gated warehouse. I parked a block away and watched as Lisa and Valdez got out. They were greeted by a group of men, tall, broad-shouldered, and clearly armed. What the hell was she doing? I grabbed my phone and started recording. The grainy video captured Lisa walking with Valdez, her body language relaxed and familiar. They disappeared into the warehouse, leaving me sitting in the dark with my heart pounding. I wanted to storm in, to drag her out and demand answers, but I knew better. This wasn't just infidelity. It was something far more dangerous. I stayed there for nearly 2 hours, watching the comings and goings of the warehouse. Men loaded crates into trucks under the cover of darkness, moving with precision and efficiency. Whatever was going on, it was big. When Lisa finally emerged, she was alone. She got into her car and drove off, and I followed her back home. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I waited until she was asleep and sent the video to Mike. "Me, it's worse than we thought. She's with Valdez. I've got video of her at his warehouse." His response came quickly. "Mike, Jesus, Adam. This is serious. Don't do anything reckless. I'll come by in the morning." But reckless was all I could think about. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of betrayal and fury pressing down on me. How could she do this? How could she lie to me, endanger me? For him. When morning came, I met Mike at a diner outside of town. He looked grim as he reviewed the video on my phone. "This is enough to get the DEA interested," he said. "But it's also enough to put a target on your back." "What do I do?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Mike leaned forward, his expression serious. "You need to protect yourself, Adam. Start separating your finances, documenting everything. And if you're smart, you'll get out of that house before this blows up." His words made my chest tighten. I didn't want to leave, to give up the life I'd built. But deep down, I knew he was right. Lisa wasn't just my wife anymore. She was a liability. That evening, I began taking the first steps. I moved half of our savings into a separate account, packed a bag with essentials, and called a lawyer. Lisa didn't suspect a thing. She came home late, as usual, kissed me on the cheek, and went straight to bed. But as I watched her sleep, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. If she thought I was going to let this go, she didn't know me at all. The next morning, I decided to act. I couldn't just wait for Lisa's lies to collapse around me. I needed to take control. I met Mike again, this time with a clear plan. "I want to take this to the DEA," I said firmly. Mike's brow furrowed. "Are you sure? Once they're involved, it's out of your hands. And if Valdez finds out?" "I don't care," I said. "Lisa made her choice. I need to protect myself." He nodded reluctantly. "All right, I'll set up a meeting." That night, Lisa was unusually cheerful, chatting about her day as if nothing had changed. It made my skin crawl. I played along, smiling and nodding, but inside, I was already preparing for what was coming. Mike arranged a discreet meeting with the DEA the next day. We met in a nondescript office, where 2 agents reviewed the evidence I'd gathered: Lisa's notebook, the emails, and the video of the warehouse. "This is solid," one agent said. But if Valdez is involved, we'll need more to build a case. What about Lisa? I asked. What happens to her? The agent's expression didn't soften. If she's complicit, she goes down with him. I swallowed hard. Despite everything, hearing it said aloud hit me like a punch. When I got home, Lisa was on her phone, laughing softly. The sight of her made my blood boil. She had no idea what was coming. The DA didn't waste time. Over the next few days, Mike kept me updated. Agents were tracking Valdez's movements and keeping tabs on Lisa. At home, I acted normal, pretending everything was fine. Lisa's late nights continued, her excuses growing thinner. One evening, I overheard her on a call. "It's all set for Friday," she said. "I'll handle it." I stepped into the room, and she froze, ending the call abruptly. "Who was that?" I asked, my tone sharp. "Work," she said quickly, avoiding my eyes. But I knew better. Friday was going to be the night everything came crashing down. Friday arrived, and the DA was ready. Mike told me they'd set up a sting operation at the warehouse. Lisa had no idea she was walking into a trap. That evening, I watched her leave the house, dressed to the nines, her phone clutched tightly. I followed her at a distance, heart pounding. She drove straight to the warehouse, where the DA agents were already in place. From my car, I saw her meet Valdez outside. They exchanged a few words before stepping inside. Minutes later, the warehouse was swarmed. Agents in tactical gear shouting orders. I gripped the steering wheel, watching as Lisa and Valdez were led out in handcuffs. The sight of Lisa in handcuffs should have brought me satisfaction, but all I felt was a hollow ache. She was escorted into a squad car, her face pale and expression unreadable. Mike called me later that night. "They've got enough to charge Valdez," he said. "And Lisa, she's implicated too. She'll likely face prison time." I thanked him and hung up, staring at the empty house. The silence was deafening. For years, I'd built a life with Lisa, and now it felt like everything was in ruins. But there was no turning back. While Lisa sat in custody, I decided to deliver the final blow. I forwarded copies of her emails and the video of her with Valdez to everyone in her nonprofit. Her pristine reputation, built on lies, crumbled overnight. Calls and messages flooded my phone. People shocked, disgusted, asking if it was true. She made her choices, I told them simply. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was public now. She couldn't hide from it anymore. By the end of the week, Lisa's name was on every local news channel, tied to Valdez's criminal empire. She had ruined us, and I made sure she felt every ounce of the fallout. The house felt emptier than ever in the weeks after Lisa's arrest. I boxed up her belongings and left them in the garage, unable to look at them without feeling a surge of anger. Her lawyer reached out once, asking for a statement. I refused. "She made her bed," I said. "Let her lie in it." Mike updated me on the case periodically. Valdez was facing major charges, and Lisa's involvement meant she wouldn't escape prison time. I filed for divorce, cutting ties with her completely. Slowly, I started rebuilding my life, focusing on my business, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected. If I learned anything, it was this: trust is fragile and betrayal has consequences.